Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Underground Subway. I want to thank you for joining us for this weekly podcast in which we are discussing ways to make life better. Years ago, the great Harriet Tubman, she was responsible for leading so many people to freedom from slavery. And in doing so, the infamous Underground Railroad is where she led people to freedom. She led people from slavery to liberty. As we said in other podcasts, what is liberty? What is freedom? What is it? What exactly does that mean? And it means to be able to function, to speak, to think, to operate without restraints. And in our lives, we do speak, we do function, we do operate, but the question is, are we doing it without restraints? And so every week we come on and we talk about how to live a better life, not just live a life. The slaves lived a life, but once they became free, they lived a better life. The Bible says that uh, Jesus Christ said, I came that you might have life, not just live, but have it more abundantly. And so our assignment is to see what can we say, what can we do to help make someone's life a little better, to lead someone to freedom. Because we're in the 21st century, we're not going to talk about the Underground Railroad as Harriet did. We're going to talk about the Underground Subway, the system that is underground, that you go underground and you come out in a different location. And we want to be able to give you some information so that when you go down, you come up in a better location with liberty. That being said, we want to challenge you. We want to challenge you to strive for a better life, challenge you to strive for a better future, not just for yourself, but for the next generation as well. Harriet said this. She said that I could have freed a lot more slaves if only they knew that they were slaves. So many of us don't even know that we are not living, we are not thinking, we're not functioning without restraints. Of course, there has to be some restraints in life, but we want to be able to live a free life. One of the things, one of the areas as we discuss every week, there's different areas of freedom of our thought, freedom of religion, our freedom in the workplace, our freedom physically. There are physical restraints that you have to deal with, even as you get older. We talked about mental restraints, the ability to think without someone holding back your thoughts. Thinking outside of the box can be challenging, especially when others are telling you not to think like that. And one other area that we're going to talk about today is political restraints, being free, and what role politics plays in our liberty and our ability to live, especially in this country. There are other countries where they don't have the political freedom. They don't have the ability to live a free, unrestrained life because of politics. Here in America, it shouldn't be that way. And so today, I have with me a guest who is the chairman of the Democratic Party in Vance County, North Carolina, who is joining us on the podcast today. And we're going to talk about how important is politics? Where are we going politically in this country? And so my guest is Mr. Blakely Bates, who is the chair of the Democratic Party in Vance County, North Carolina. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me today. It's my pleasure to join you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Mr. Blake, let's get right into this conversation. We talk about restraints, we talk about freedom, we talk about liberty. Politics plays a vital role in that. Would you agree or disagree? What are your views on that?
Well, I think that politics plays a vital role in our everyday lives where it's related to the immediate um, interactions or engagement of our lives, or whether it is unrelated to the everyday functionality of our lives. politics has a legal and maybe a official business that most of really the average person don't have a clue or know anything about. And we should be more engaged in things that govern our lives on a daily basis, and how it will affect us, not just economically and socially, but how those political decisions will affect us in the longevity of our life as we even get older for our children and their children to come.
Mr. Bates, well, that sounds wonderful answer. I want to ask you a question about a word that we really don't hear a lot about in politics. Maybe we do hear a lot about it, but in a negative view. And that word is trust. How important is it if you are an elected official? How important is it? How important is the trust process that I have to trust that you are in office looking out for my best good, for my betterment? You have my best interest in heart, as opposed to you being elected and it becomes a job or a form of employment for you.
Well, it's very important that you trust your elected officials, but it's interesting to me that you even engage and ask me that specific question, because just today I was actually at the barbershop. I'll take a real life approach. A lady came in and she was delivering plates. She caught my attention as she was speaking to the gentleman and everyone in the shop, thanking us for supporting the event that her organization had put on. But what caught me when I talked with her about, she asked me a question. She said, "Sir, what do you do?" I told her how I was engaged in community activities, and I talked about political structure. She questioned me about how is it that the public is supposed to trust our representatives that we so elect and put into these positions. I will give you the same response that I gave to her. I said it's imperative that we do put some trust into our representatives that we send to sit on our city council, our county commissioners, our state legislators, and all of those, and all the way up to Congress. It's always good to put our trust in, but we have a responsibility. Specifically, we have a communal responsibility and a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that these individuals in which we trust and we send are doing what we're asking them to do. It's going to start with accountability. And if we're not having the community hold accountable for those that we decided that we wanted to collectively vote for to send to whichever space, local, state, or to the federal level, then that responsibility not falls on the politician for failing us as much as it falls on us as the constituents for not making them accountable or holding them responsible for what they said.
Well, what about in the instance of a rural area, well, even urban areas in which most people do not know who their elected officials are outside of course, every American knows who the president is. Every American knows who the vice president is. And immediately, the lower you go, the more that knowledge of who the official is dwindles. You'd probably be surprised how many Americans do not know who Chuck Schumer or Mitch McConnell is by name. And then, of course, if you don't know who your majority leaders, that a lot of people may not know who Nancy Pelosi is or Dick Durbin. Of course, most people do not know who their city council person or county commissioner, who that individual is. And if you don't know that, then how do you hold that person accountable? You have no clue. And that official may not be accessible. I hope that question makes sense.
Well, I think you're asking kind of a 2 to 3 part question, but I will try to address that as best I can. Well, first of all, let's look at the fact I made my notes correctly. You asked the question first, how will people know who their representatives are.
Well, not
Well,
necessarily how will people know, but I'm just stating that most people don't know, because you mentioned that we need to hold them accountable. Most people don't know who to hold accountable. Most people
well,
have no idea what's going on politically and how it impacts their lives. They just feel like everything is under the blanket of a political party or the president.
no, sir. There are many. There are many processes, I would say, to understanding the political structure. Although the political structure is very complex, just to be engaging, first of all, we got to want to know. So, we have to want to know who's sitting where and who we're voting for. If we're voting for the city, you can go down to your city, to town hall or city hall, and inquire with some of the staff there. Start with your city manager, who's responsible for city operations. Talking with specifically your city clerk, who works very closely with your city council. So
may I interrupt you, because you got an interesting point, but you triggered something. Very good point that you made. I hate to interrupt anyone when they're speaking, but you had a good point. Now because you mentioned the process and you mentioned knowing. You said knowing who we're voting for. Do you think, and I hope we're not shifting out in the left field with this, do you think that the caucuses have allowed most voters to become more lazy and laid back? And what I mean by that is, if I don't know who I'm voting for when I show up to vote at the polls, and I'm handed a slip of paper saying that the policeman's caucus or the Black caucus or whoever, they're endorsing a list of candidates, I will just go down the list and vote for whoever basically Mr. Bates says I should vote for. Does that make us lazy and not go through the effort and the work to find out who we're voting for?
Well, sir, I would say that it has put us in a state of complacency.
Right.
And because if you're looking to speak from that, in most big cities and rural areas, you will find that most people are not as engaged in the political infrastructure of their local government by any means, whether it's county and or city.
Right, exactly.
But what I would suggest is, it is the responsibility, and I take the responsibility when I say this, it is the responsibilities of those that do know. Right. To go out and necessarily inform, engage the constituents that are a part of their local community. As you mentioned earlier, I am the new chair of the Vance County Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. And it is my goal. I know many people are not engaged into the political process. I know that in certain areas where people have fallen off and it has just had years of dormant just laying there. But it is my responsibility, I believe, and I hold myself accountable to educate, to give information from the North Carolina State Board of Elections, from our local Board of Elections, and educate people as it relates to them being involved. Again, as I stated earlier, it is these situations, it is the political infrastructures that we know of and things that we don't know of that are affecting our daily lives. Mm-hmm. So I think it's my responsibility to be able to engage the constituents and get them involved and direct them where to go and give them election education. And so that's where it starts. And we got to be educated and informed. And some people got to be informed to be informative. But I think that's just where we got to begin in order for people to become more active in the political spectrum and not just during election time. And I think that's where we get it confused. We have an election every single year. But what we don't have is people not just coming to vote, but being engaged in the political process of that, which requires, and I'll say this until I probably finish my career in politics, is that there is a judiciary responsibility that we must uphold along with being involved and engaged in the political spectrum, whether you're Republican and or Democrat. We
haven't talked about. I hope I'm not opening a can of worms. I'm good for that. But I want to ask you a question, and you do not have to go into detail and names. You know, I just want to know this question because I think it is critical for a local level as well as a national level. Has there ever been a time, because you stated, and congratulations, we want to congratulate you on being elected as the Democratic chair of Vance County, North Carolina, Democratic Party. Has there ever been a time in your political career, whether you were in politics or on the outside looking in, trying to get in, has there ever been an election when you as a Democrat has looked and said from your heart, this Republican candidate is probably better served to serve the people than the Democratic candidate?
Mr. Austin, I do have to say that I would answer this question as we are getting ready to exit this interview with a very strategical statement.
Of course, you better.
It is my responsibility as being the chair of the Vance County Democratic Party to uphold the values.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The values of the North Carolina and the national DNC. And so I will say, from the standpoint of my view, I believe in holding up the platform of the Democratic Party, by all means, to be inclusive. I want to stand with the party that is believe in diversity and is part of compassion, a party of educational and economical opportunities.
I agree, and I would not have expected any other answer, and it's what I would expect if you were a Republican. The purpose for that question wasn't to put you on the spot, and I hope I didn't do that. The purpose was that there are times when you may have someone in the party that's running that you may say to yourself, this person is really not qualified to represent us, although their views are different. This person in my party really is not the person that if I could switch them out. And that happens on the Republican side. There be plenty that after the last presidential election, not this past one, but the election of 2016, said, listen, I'm a Republican, but man, I wish we had someone else representing our party. And I'm just wondering, on the Democratic side, has there ever been a moment when you said, you know what, I'm going to go with this candidate because I'm going to uphold the platform, but in my heart of hearts, I wish we had someone that was better qualified. And so, go ahead.
And I don't want to cut you off, but I do think that we, as an entire body, from the DNC all the way down to the local level, we can, and I'll speak this from a Democratic standpoint, I really don't think that I'm going to answer your question as well as you like me to, but I do think that from a Democratic standpoint, we do have individuals that are very, very well qualified. And I think that a lot of the times, as being a person that represents what we believe in, we have to be able to put our best foot forward.
Right.
And that was
the basis. That was the basis
to support what we have.
Right. That was the basis for the question, that, not so much, would you ever vote? I wasn't trying to get you to say that you ever voted, stepped across party lines. I was trying to get the point across that, both parties can have people running that are not the highest of quality of representatives.
Absolutely. We can have that.
Right.
But I think that we can improve in sometimes who we may present. But also, even as we're presenting the individuals that we see that have come through delegation votes and then have made it and made it through convention and all of those types of things. And I don't want to get into the dynamics of that because I know time is gone. But I do want to say that if we are focused on making sure that we have individuals of great representation, focusing again on the values, and have a responsible leadership, I think that we can provide the people someone or a great representation for the entire party that can help move us forward. But again, we cannot depend directly on the individuals we vote. We must take accountability and responsibility for those that we do put in leadership.
Final thought, and I'll give you about 30 seconds. What would you say if you were in a room with 137 137 young people who were trying to who were considering going into politics? What would you say to those young people? What's the first step that you would tell them to do? Just not the first step. What is one thing you would say to any young person that's probably 30 years old, who is very passionate about their community and very involved in the community, and everyone is looking at him or her and saying, you know what, you ought to get into politics, you ought to run. What's the first thing they need to do?
Engagement. Engage with your community, I think, is very important. Prior to running to any office, you have to understand the functionalities. You have to understand the governing bodies. You have to engage and be in your community. And in order for you to be informative, you have to get the information to inform. So I would tell any young person, please take the opportunity to learn the structure of government and engage, encounter, and then embrace the community as it comes to local politics and local government.
Sounds great. One last question. This is a yes or no answer. We need to get into a conversation concerning what is going on with the Supreme Court decisions, with the trust factor. We need to talk about these things because there are a lot of underlying factors that go into every Supreme Court decision. Would you be willing to come back and do another podcast with us and just talk about that aspect?
Oh, absolutely. I would thoroughly enjoy that conversation.
All right, we'll set it up and we'll have you back in a couple weeks or so.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you again for having me, and I enjoyed my interview today.
Thank you so much for joining. Well, thank you all for joining our podcast today, The Underground Subway. We are going to do what it takes, every discussion, whether it is challenging, to make sure that we have a better life of freedom. I want to thank Mr. Blakely Bates, who is the new Democratic chair of Vance County, North Carolina. We're so proud of him and thrilled that he took time out of his busy schedule, very busy schedule, especially with elections coming up or early voting already starting. We know that he is campaigning on the campaign trail and trying to do everything. And for him to take this time out to join us makes us feel really special. Listen, I said it when we started, I'll say it again. Harriet said I could free so many more people if they only knew that they were slaves. And so this conversation hopefully will open the eyes of someone and they will realize, you know what, I've been a slave in my own little world. I need to open up and I need to do what Mr. Bates said. I need to engage. That is my challenge to you. Engage, get out, be more informed, be more vocal, be more involved in your community. It is your community. It is not just on a national level. It means more than just knowing who the president and vice president is. We need to know who our local representatives are because they are the ones that make the decision for our community. The president has no dealings with what's going on in your local school system, but it is your school board members that do. Know who's on the ballot. Don't go into the booth and look at both names and just do eeny, meeny, miny, mo. No, you need to know ahead of time. I believe in you. I appreciate you. And I challenge you, my friends, that tonight when you go to bed, look yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eye and ask yourself, did I do something today to work toward my purpose? Did I do something today to work toward my freedom? Did I do something today to work toward the freedom of my family, my children, my nieces, my nephews, and my grandchildren? Or did I simply waste another day? We'll see you next time on the Underground Subway. Peace and purpose.